I thought my Alaskan cruise would be the perfect escape after 28 years of single motherhood, but when mechanical problems grounded our plane, I found myself driving back home at 3 in the afternoon instead of sailing toward glaciers. As I turned onto Maple Street, my heart stopped. A massive moving truck sat in my driveway, its back doors wide open, revealing my grandmother's mahogany dining set and my mother's antique china cabinet. Two men I didn't recognize were carrying my father's leather recliner toward the truck, while my son Marcus crouched by my front door with what looked like lockpicks. His wife Brielle stood beside him, hands on her hips, directing the operation like a general commanding troops. When I slammed my car door, Marcus shot upright, his face draining of color. The lockpicks scattered across my welcome mat. The sight of my 35-year-old son attempting to break into my house felt like a physical blow to my chest. This was the same boy I'd rocked through countless nightmares after his father died in that construction accident, when Marcus was only 7 years old. I'd given up my nursing career, cashed in my retirement funds, and worked double shifts at the local diner to put him through college. When he wanted to start his landscaping business 5 years ago, I'd co-signed loans and helped him buy equipment. When he married Brielle 2 years back, I'd paid for their honeymoon to Hawaii because they claimed they couldn't afford it. Standing there in my driveway, watching strangers load my family heirlooms into a truck, I remembered how excited Brielle had been 3 weeks ago when she suggested this cruise. She'd called it my well-deserved vacation and even offered to pay for it as a thank you gift. I'd been so touched by her thoughtfulness, so grateful, that my daughter-in-law finally seemed to appreciate everything I'd done for their family. The irony burned like acid in my throat. Marcus wore his usual work clothes, faded jeans and a green polo shirt with his company logo, but his hands were shaking as he tried to hide the lockpicks behind his back. Brielle looked stunning as always in her designer yoga pants and cropped sweater, her platinum blonde hair pulled into a perfect ponytail. For someone who claimed they were drowning in debt, she certainly maintained an expensive appearance. "Mom!" Marcus stammered, his voice cracking like a teenager caught sneaking out. "Weren't you supposed to be gone for 2 weeks? Your flight was this morning." "The plane had mechanical problems," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. "What are you doing in my house?" Brielle stepped forward, flashing that practiced smile she used when asking for money. "We were just checking on things while you were away. You know, making sure everything was secure." I walked closer to the truck, my legs moving on autopilot, while my brain tried to process what I was seeing. Inside the cargo area sat my mother's Royal Crown Derby tea service, the one she'd saved for special occasions and never lived to see me use. My father's Purple Heart from World War II was nestled in a box beside my grandmother's silver candlesticks. These weren't random items. They were the most valuable pieces I owned, the irreplaceable family treasures that had survived the Depression, the war, and decades of family moves. "Checking on things," I repeated, reaching into the truck to touch my mother's jewelry box. "By loading everything into a moving truck." The two moving men exchanged uncomfortable glances. One of them, a heavy-set man with graying temples, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, these folks said they were your family and you'd authorized the move. If there's a problem—" "There's definitely a problem," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I never authorized anything." Marcus stepped between us, his face flushed with panic and something else. Anger. "Mom, you're confusing yourself again. Remember, we talked about storing your valuables safely while you were traveling. You were worried about break-ins." The lie hit me like a slap. I'd never worried about break-ins in this quiet neighborhood, where Mrs. Patterson across the street knew everyone's business, and the mailman had been the same person for 15 years. More importantly, I'd never had any conversations about storing my belongings anywhere. But what really sent ice through my veins was the casual way Marcus lied as if he'd practiced the words. I walked to my front door fishing my house key from my purse, but when I tried to insert it into the lock, it wouldn't fit. The metal scraped against something that felt wrong, and I noticed fresh scratches around a deadbolt that looked newer than the rest of the hardware. "Why doesn't my key work in my own front door?" I asked, turning to face my son. Marcus ran his hand through his sandy hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "We upgraded your security system while you were gone. You know, as a surprise. The old locks were pretty worn out. So, you changed my locks without permission and then tried to pick them when you thought I was 3,000 miles away." The pieces clicked together in my mind like a puzzle solving itself. "You were never planning to tell me about this, were you? You were planning to rob me blind and change the locks, so I couldn't get back into my own home." Brielle's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "Ashlyn, you're being dramatic. We're family. We would never—" "Don't you dare!" I interrupted, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Don't you dare stand in my driveway caught red-handed stealing from me and tell me I'm being dramatic." The moving men started backing away toward their truck cab. "Look, lady, we don't want any part of a family dispute. We're just going to—" "You're not going anywhere until the police get here," I said, pulling out my cell phone. Marcus lunged forward, his hand reaching for my phone. "Mom, wait. You don't understand. We can explain everything. Just give us a chance to—" I stepped back, holding the phone out of his reach. For the first time in my son's life, I saw him as a stranger. This wasn't the boy I'd raised, the one who used to bring me dandelions and promised to take care of me when I got old. This was a man who'd been planning to steal everything I owned while I was trapped on a cruise ship in the middle of nowhere. "Explain what, Marcus? Explain how you forged new keys to my house. Explain how you hired movers to steal my furniture. Explain how you changed my locks so I couldn't come home." My voice cracked on the last words, but I pressed on. "Or maybe you want to explain why you're stealing from the woman who sacrificed everything to give you a life?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. In the distance, I could hear Mrs. Patterson's screen door creak open, and I knew she was watching from her porch, probably already reaching for her own phone. My hands trembled as I dialed 911, but my resolve never wavered. This was the moment my old life ended and my fight for justice began. The police arrived within 10 minutes, 2 officers in a patrol car followed by what looked like a detective in an unmarked sedan. Officer Rodriguez, a young woman with kind eyes, took my statement while her partner, Officer Kim, spoke with the moving crew. Detective Walsh, a weathered man in his 50s, immediately focused on the forged documents scattered across my front porch. "These fell out of your purse," I told Brielle, handing the papers to Detective Walsh. "I think you'll find them interesting." Brielle's face went white as the detective examined the documents. Marcus started pacing in circles, running his hands through his hair and muttering under his breath. The moving men stood by their truck, clearly wishing they'd never taken this job. "Mrs. Garrett," Detective Walsh said, using my married name with professional courtesy, "these appear to be property transfer documents with your signature. Did you sign these?" "Absolutely not," I said, studying the papers over his shoulder. My supposed signature looked close, but not quite right. The loops in my Y were too rounded and my A was missing the small flourish I'd used since high school. I've never seen those papers before in my life. "They're from the law office of Douglas Whitman." The detective continued reading the letterhead. "Have you had any contact with this attorney?" "None whatsoever." Officer Rodriguez finished interviewing the movers and approached our group. "The moving company says they were hired by Marcus Garrett 3 days ago. They were told to move everything to a storage unit across town. The payment was made in cash." Marcus finally stopped pacing and faced us, his shoulders sagging with defeat. Okay, fine. Yes, we hired the movers. But it's not what it looks like. We're in serious financial trouble, Mom. The business is failing. We're behind on rent and we owe thousands on credit cards. We thought maybe we could borrow some of your things, sell them, and then replace them before you got back. Borrow? I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. You don't borrow someone's family heirlooms by changing their locks and hiring moving trucks. Brielle stepped forward, tears streaming down her face in what I now recognized as a practiced performance. Ashlyn, we're desperate. The bank is threatening to foreclose on our apartment lease because we're 3 months behind. Our credit cards are maxed out at $12,000. Marcus's business lost 2 major contracts this spring, and we haven't been able to catch up. So you decided to steal from me, I asked, instead of asking for help like adults. We didn't want to burden you anymore, Marcus said quietly. You've already done so much for us. We thought if we could just get through this rough patch. Detective Walsh held up his hand for silence. Let me understand this correctly. You changed the locks on your mother's house-hired movers to remove her belongings and forged legal documents transferring ownership of her property. This goes far beyond financial desperation. He was right. As I looked more carefully at the scattered papers, I found documents I hadn't noticed before. A power of attorney form with my forged signature, a medical evaluation claiming I showed signs of early dementia, and most shocking of all, a deed transfer attempting to put my house in Marcus's name. These medical records, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They say I've been diagnosed with cognitive decline and memory loss. I've never been diagnosed with anything like that. I haven't even seen a doctor in 6 months except for my annual physical. Detective Walsh studied the medical evaluation. This is signed by Dr. Jonathan Harrison. Do you know this physician? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. He's a friend of mine. We went to high school together. A friend who falsified medical records about my mental state. The full scope of their betrayal was becoming clear. You weren't just planning to rob me. You were planning to have me declared incompetent so you could take everything legally. Officer Rodriguez looked up from her notepad. Mrs. Garrett, I need to ask, have you been experiencing any memory problems or confusion lately? Any incidents that might have given your son reason to be concerned about your mental health? Absolutely not, I said firmly. I balance my own checkbook, manage my own medications, drive safely, and live independently. 3 weeks ago, I planned an entire cruise vacation by myself, including booking flights and arranging pet care for my neighbor's cat. Does that sound like someone with dementia? Brielle wiped her nose with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup. We weren't going to really have you declared incompetent. It was just in case we needed legal protection if someone questioned the property transfer. Legal protection for stealing my house? I stared at her in amazement. Do you hear yourself? The detective's phone buzzed and he stepped away to take the call. When he returned, his expression was grimmer than before. I just spoke with the district attorney's office. Douglas Whitman is currently under investigation by the FBI for elder fraud. Apparently, this isn't the first time he's helped family members forge documents to steal elderly relatives' property. My legs felt weak, and I reached for the porch railing to steady myself. This wasn't just a desperate attempt by my son and daughter-in-law to solve their money problems. They'd gotten involved with criminals, with people who made a living preying on elderly homeowners. How long has this been going on? I asked Marcus directly. How long have you been planning this? He couldn't meet my eyes. We first contacted the lawyer about 6 months ago, but we never meant for it to go this far. It kept escalating. 6 months. While I'd been helping them with rent money and car payments, while I'd been worrying about their financial stress and offering emotional support, They'd been plotting to steal my home and have me declared mentally incompetent. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. "Mrs. Garrett," Detective Walsh said gently, "I need to inform you that we're going to arrest your son and daughter-in-law on charges of attempted fraud forgery and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. Given the involvement of Attorney Whitman and the falsified medical records, this case will likely be turned over to federal authorities." As the officers read Marcus and Brielle their rights, I watched my son's face crumble. For a moment, he looked like the 7-year-old boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. But that little boy was gone, replaced by a man who'd been willing to destroy his own mother to solve his problems. "Mom," Marcus said as Officer Rodriguez guided him toward the patrol car, "I'm sorry. I never wanted it to happen like this." "But you did want it to happen," I replied, my voice steady despite the tears on my cheeks. "You just wanted me to be 3,000 miles away when it did." As the police cars pulled out of my driveway, I stood alone in front of my house, looking at the scattered remnants of my son's betrayal. The moving truck sat silent, its cargo doors still open, my family treasures visible inside like evidence of a crime, which I realized was exactly what they were. The next morning, I woke up in my childhood bedroom feeling like I'd aged 10 years overnight. The house felt different somehow, violated and unsafe despite being filled with familiar objects. I'd spent most of the previous evening with Mrs. Patterson, my 78-year-old neighbor who'd brought over tea and homemade cookies while I tried to process what had happened. I knew something was wrong. She'd told me, settling her small frame into my kitchen chair. "That boy of yours has been coming around here for weeks, always when you weren't home. And that wife of his. She kept asking me questions about your routine when you went grocery shopping, when you visited the library. I thought it was just concern, but now I see it was something else entirely." Mrs. Patterson had been watching my house more carefully than I'd realized. She'd noticed the lock change 3 weeks ago and had seen Marcus measuring my windows and photographing my garden. Most importantly, she'd seen Attorney Douglas Whitman visit my house twice while I was at work, always accompanied by Marcus and Brielle. "They had papers with them," she'd explained. "Official-looking documents. I thought maybe you were updating your will or something, but when I asked Marcus about it, he got all flustered and said it was a surprise for you." Now, sitting at my kitchen table with my morning coffee, I began the painful process of investigating my own son's betrayal. I started with my computer, checking my browser history for any unauthorized use. What I found made my stomach turn. Someone had been researching estate planning websites' life insurance policies, and most disturbing of all, websites about elderly care facilities and memory care units. The coffee cup slipped from my hands, shattering on the kitchen floor as I read search terms like "how to prove parent is incompetent" and "power of attorney for dementia patients." Mixed in with these horrible searches were others that made my blood run cold: home accidents elderly and kitchen safety hazards seniors. My hands shook as I called my bank. Thomas Crawford, my personal banker for 15 years, answered immediately when his assistant mentioned my name. "Ashlyn, I'm so glad you called," Thomas said, his voice tight with concern. "I've been trying to reach you for weeks about some unusual activity on your account." "What kind of activity?" I asked, though I was already dreading the answer. "Small withdrawals over the past 6 months, always for amounts just under $500. They were made with your debit card, and they all have notes like family assistance or emergency help, so we assumed they were legitimate. But the frequency has increased significantly." I pulled up my online banking while Thomas spoke, scrolling through months of transactions I'd been too trusting to examine carefully. There it was, a pattern of theft disguised as family generosity. $200 here, $400 there, always with explanations that sounded reasonable if you weren't looking for deception. Thomas, I never made those withdrawals. I never authorized anyone to use my debit card. I was afraid of that, he said with a heavy sigh. The total amount taken is just over $8,000. I can freeze your accounts immediately and start the fraud investigation process. $8,000. That was enough for a down payment on a small apartment or several months of rent. It was also enough to explain why Marcus and DiL had become more desperate. They'd been living off stolen money from my account, and when that wasn't enough to solve their problems, they'd escalated to trying to steal my entire house. After ending the call with Thomas, I began searching through my important papers more systematically. My file cabinet showed signs of tampering. Folders moved to different positions, papers shuffled in ways I never would have done. In my bedroom dresser, I found evidence that someone had photographed my Social Security card passport and birth certificate. But the most shocking discovery came when I was cleaning up the scattered papers from yesterday's confrontation. Hidden among the obviously forged documents was an insurance policy I'd never seen before. According to the paperwork, I had a $200,000 life insurance policy with Marcus and DiL listed as the primary beneficiaries. The policy had been purchased 6 months ago with medical records indicating I had a severe heart condition. I called Dr. Patricia Vance, my family physician, immediately. "Ashlyn, thank goodness," Dr. Vance said when she came to the phone. "I've been getting the strangest requests for your medical records. Some attorney's office has been calling repeatedly claiming they need documentation of your heart condition for an insurance claim." "I don't have a heart condition," I said, my voice barely steady. "Exactly. That's why I refuse to provide any records. Your last physical showed perfect cardiovascular health for a woman your age, but someone has been very persistent about getting documentation of a condition that doesn't exist." The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. The forged medical records claiming I had dementia. The life insurance policy based on a fictional heart condition. The internet searches about home accidents and elderly safety hazards. Marcus and DiL weren't just planning to steal my house. They were planning to kill me and make it look like an accident. I sank into my kitchen chair, overwhelmed by the scope of their betrayal. This wasn't desperate kids making a bad decision. This was a calculated plan to murder me for insurance money and property inheritance. My phone rang, interrupting my spiral of horror. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something prompted me to answer. "Mrs. Garrett, this is Agent Sarah Chen with the FBI. Detective Walsh gave me your contact information regarding the Douglas Whitman investigation. I'd like to meet with you as soon as possible to discuss your case." Agent Chen arrived at my house within 2 hours, a compact woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She carried a thick folder that she placed on my kitchen table before sitting down. "Mrs. Garrett, your son and daughter-in-law have gotten themselves involved in something much bigger than simple fraud," she began. "Douglas Whitman is the center of an elder abuse ring that spans 3 counties. We've documented at least 12 other families who've lost their homes through similar schemes." She opened the folder, revealing photographs and documents from other cases. The pattern was always the same: adult children claiming their elderly parents were becoming incompetent, forged medical records, property transfers, and in 3 cases, suspicious deaths that had netted the beneficiaries substantial life insurance payouts. "The difference in your case," Agent Chen continued, "is that your unexpected return home allowed us to catch them in the act. Most victims don't realize what's happening until it's too late." "Are you saying other people have been murdered?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "We believe so, yes. We've been investigating this ring for 18 months, but we haven't had enough evidence to bring federal charges. Your case could be the key to stopping them permanently." Agent Chen explained that Dr. Jonathan Harrison, Marcus's high school friend, had been falsifying medical records for payments of $5,000 per case. Attorney Whitman had been taking a percentage of all property sales and insurance payouts. The network included corrupt insurance agents, estate appraisers, and even some assisted living facilities that helped facilitate the fraudulent declarations of incompetence. "What we need from you," Agent Chen said, "is your cooperation in gathering additional evidence. We believe your son and daughter-in-law will contact you again, probably trying to convince you to drop the charges or work out some kind of family settlement. If you're willing, we'd like you to record those conversations." The thought of seeing Marcus and Brielle again made my stomach clench, but the image of other elderly people being victimized by this network gave me strength. "What do you need me to do?" "First, we're going to install some discreet recording equipment in your house. We'll also provide you with a small device you can wear during any meetings with your son. Most importantly, we need you to act like you're considering forgiveness, like you might be willing to work things out privately." "You want me to pretend I might let them get away with trying to kill me?" Agent Chen leaned forward, her expression intense. "Mrs. Garrett, what they did to you was horrible. But if we can use your case to bring down this entire network, we can prevent it from happening to dozens of other families. Are you strong enough to help us do that?" I thought about Mrs. Patterson across the street, about my friend Dorothy at the library, about all the elderly women I knew who lived alone and trusted their families to protect them. Marcus and Brielle had tried to steal my life, but I could use that betrayal to save others. "Yes," I said firmly. "I'm strong enough. What do we do first?" Over the next week, I transformed from victim to investigator with Agent Chen's guidance. She'd installed tiny cameras throughout my house, one disguised as a smoke detector in the living room, another hidden in a picture frame in the kitchen, and a third concealed in the grandfather clock in the hallway. I wore a small recording device clipped inside my bra whenever I left the house, and my phone had been equipped with software that automatically saved all calls and text messages. The hardest part was pretending to be the confused, vulnerable woman Marcus and Brielle had tried to create through their forged medical records. When Marcus called from jail collect, I forced myself to sound uncertain and frightened. "Oh, Marcus, honey, I'm so confused about what happened yesterday," I said, following the script Agent Chen had helped me prepare. "The police are telling me all these terrible things, but I can't remember authorizing them to arrest you. Did I sign something I shouldn't have?" "Mom, listen to me very carefully." Marcus said, his voice urgent through the static prison phone connection. "You need to call Attorney Whitman and tell him you want to drop all charges. Tell him it was a family misunderstanding and you don't want to press charges." "But the police said you were stealing from me, and they found all those papers with my signature that I don't remember signing." "You've been having memory problems, remember? We talked about this. Sometimes you forget things and that's okay. Brielle and I were just trying to help you manage your finances and keep your house safe." The ease with which he lied took my breath away, even though I'd been expecting it. This was my son, the boy I'd raised to value honesty and compassion, calmly gaslighting me into believing I was losing my mind. "I have been feeling forgetful lately," I admitted, playing my role. "Maybe I did agree to something and just can't remember. Should I call that lawyer man?" "Yes, Mom. Call Douglas Whitman and tell him you want everything dropped. We can work this out as a family." After ending the call, I sat in my kitchen and cried for the son I'd lost somewhere along the way. Agent Chen had prepared me for this emotional difficulty, but knowing it was coming didn't make it any easier to bear. The next day brought a visit from Brielle, who'd been released on bail posted by her mother. She arrived with flowers and my favorite cookies from the bakery downtown, playing the role of the concerned daughter-in-law perfectly. "Ashlyn, I'm so sorry about the confusion yesterday," she said, settling into my living room with practiced grace. "I can see how it all looked from the outside, but you have to understand. We were only trying to protect you." The hidden camera in my smoke detector was capturing everything as I served tea and tried to look bewildered. "Protect me from what, dear?" Um, from making mistakes with your money and your house. You've been having some memory issues lately, and we were worried you might get taken advantage of by scam artists or predatory salespeople. We thought if we could help you organize your valuables and maybe simplify your living situation. Simplify how? I asked, genuinely curious to see how far she'd push the lie. Well, this house is awfully big for one person. And with all these valuable antiques and family heirlooms, it's really a target for burglars. We thought maybe you'd be happier in a nice assisted living community where you wouldn't have to worry about home maintenance or security. There it was, the end game. They weren't just planning to steal my possessions, they wanted to warehouse me in institutional care while they sold my house and spent my money. But I love my house, I said plaintively. I've lived here for 40 years. All my memories are here. I know, sweetie, and that's exactly why your memory problems are so hard on you. Sometimes when people start losing their mental sharpness, familiar places can actually become confusing and frightening. A professional care facility would give you structure and support. Brielle leaned forward, taking my hands in hers. Her touch made my skin crawl, but I forced myself not to pull away. The important thing right now is getting Marcus out of this legal trouble. The police have made a terrible mistake, but we can fix it if you're willing to help. What do I need to do? Just call the district attorney and tell them you want to drop the charges. Explain that it was all a misunderstanding and that Marcus was helping you with your affairs because you've been having some cognitive difficulties. But what about those papers the police found? The ones with my signature that I don't remember signing? Brielle's mask slipped for just a moment, and I caught a glimpse of calculation in her eyes. Sometimes when people are having memory problems, they sign things and then forget about them later. It's very common with early dementia. The word hung in the air like a poison cloud. She was asking me to publicly admit to having dementia to validate the lies they'd told about my mental state, and to take responsibility for their crimes by claiming I'd authorized everything and simply forgotten about it. I'm scared, Brielle, I said, letting my voice tremble. What if I really am losing my mind? What if I can't trust my own memory anymore? That's exactly why you need us to take care of you, she said, squeezing my hands tighter. Family looks out for family. We'll make sure you're safe and comfortable, and we'll handle all the complicated financial and legal stuff, so you don't have to worry about it. After she left, I called Agent Chen immediately. She wants me to confess to having dementia and take responsibility for their fraud, I reported. She's also pushing hard for me to contact the district attorney about dropping charges. Perfect, Agent Chen said. That confirms they're still planning to use the incompetency angle as their defense. We need one more piece of evidence, though. We need them to discuss the life insurance policy and the murder plan. How do we get them to admit that? You're going to call Marcus and tell him you found the insurance paperwork and you're confused about it. Act like you don't understand why you have a policy you don't remember buying. The call to Marcus the next day was the most difficult acting I'd ever done. Marcus, honey, I found some insurance papers in my dresser and I'm so confused, I began. They say I have a life insurance policy for $200,000, but I don't remember buying any life insurance. There was a long pause before Marcus responded. Oh, that. Yeah, Brielle helped you set that up a few months ago. You were worried about leaving me with expenses if something happened to you. But the papers say I have a heart condition. I don't understand. I feel fine. Mom, you had some chest pains a while back, remember? Dr. Harrison examined you and found some irregularities. That's why we thought the life insurance was important. I never had chest pains, and I've never seen Dr. Harrison in my life. You're forgetting again, Mom. This is exactly what we've been worried about. Your memory is getting worse. The call continued for 20 more minutes with Marcus building an elaborate fiction about my supposed heart condition, my supposed memory problems, and my supposed agreement to the life insurance policy. Every word was being recorded, and every lie was another nail in the coffin of his defense. But the most chilling moment came near the end of the conversation. "Marcus, what happens to the insurance money if something happens to me?" I asked innocently. "Well, it would come to me and Brielle since we're your beneficiaries. That's how life insurance works. It helps families cover expenses and debts after someone passes away." "What kind of expenses?" "Oh, funeral costs, medical bills, outstanding debts. And if there were any accidents around the house, the insurance would help cover the costs of repairs and cleanup." Accidents around the house. The phrase sent ice water through my veins, but I forced my voice to remain steady. "What kind of accidents?" "Just general things that can happen to elderly people living alone. Falls, kitchen accidents, that sort of thing. That's another reason why we think assisted living might be safer for you." When I hung up the phone, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the device. Marcus had just told me in his own words that they were planning to kill me in a staged home accident and use the life insurance money to cover their debts. Agent Chen arrived within the hour to review the recording. "This is exactly what we needed," she said, her voice grim with satisfaction. "Combined with the forged documents, the unauthorized bank withdrawals, and the falsified medical records, we have enough evidence to bring conspiracy to commit murder charges." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we spring the trap. Tomorrow you're going to call both Marcus and Brielle and tell them you've decided to drop all charges and work things out privately. You're going to invite them over to discuss the details. And when they arrive, they're going to walk into the biggest mistake of their lives." I spent that evening preparing for what might be the last conversation I ever had with my son. The recording equipment was ready, the FBI agents were positioned, and the trap was set. All that remained was to see if Marcus and Brielle would confess to planning my murder when they thought they were safe from consequences. Looking back, I realized that night was when I finally accepted that the little boy I'd raised was truly gone, replaced by a stranger willing to kill his own mother for money. The grief was overwhelming, but so was my determination to make sure they never got the chance to hurt me or anyone else. The morning of the confrontation, I woke before dawn with a strange sense of calm. Agent Chen had briefed me thoroughly on what to expect. Marcus and Brielle would arrive, thinking they'd convinced me to drop all charges and sign over power of attorney. They had no idea that FBI agents were positioned in unmarked vehicles around my neighborhood, or that every word they spoke would be recorded as evidence. I dressed carefully in a soft blue cardigan and comfortable slacks, the kind of outfit a confused elderly woman might choose for an important family meeting. Agent Chen had coached me on appearing slightly disheveled and uncertain, but not so much that it seemed like an obvious act. At 9 o'clock sharp, I called Marcus at the number Brielle had given me for his temporary phone. They'd been staying at her mother's apartment since their arrest, planning their next move. "Marcus, sweetie, I've been thinking about everything we discussed," I said, injecting a quaver into my voice. "I want to fix this mess between us. Can you and Brielle come over today so we can work everything out?" "Of course, Mom," Marcus replied, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "We'll be right over. And Mom, thank you for being reasonable about this. I know it's been confusing for you." They arrived 45 minutes later, both dressed like respectable family members coming to help an elderly relative with legal troubles. Marcus wore a button-down shirt and khakis, while Brielle had chosen a conservative dress and minimal makeup. They carried a briefcase full of documents and wore expressions of concerned compassion. "Ashlyn, you look tired," Brielle said, embracing me warmly for the benefit of any watching neighbors. "This whole situation has been so stressful for all of us." "I'm just so confused about everything," I replied, leading them into my living room where the hidden camera had the best angle. "The police are telling me one thing, but you're telling me something completely different. I don't know what to believe anymore." Marcus sat beside me on the couch, taking my hand in his. Mom, I know this is hard, but you have to trust us. We're your family and we love you. Everything we've done has been to protect you. Protect me from what? From making mistakes because of your memory problems, Brielle said, settling into the armchair across from us. The doctor said it's very common for people in the early stages of dementia to become paranoid and suspicious of the people trying to help them. What doctor? I keep hearing about this doctor, but I don't remember seeing anyone. Marcus squeezed my hand. Dr. Harrison. He's been monitoring your condition for months. Don't you remember the appointment where he explained about your heart problems and memory issues? I forced myself to look confused and frightened. No, I don't remember. That scares me, Marcus. What if I really am losing my mind? You're not losing your mind, Mom. You're just getting older and your brain is changing. That's why you need us to help you make important decisions. Brielle opened the briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. We've prepared some paperwork that will make everything legal and clear. A power of attorney so we can help you manage your finances, a healthcare directive so we can make medical decisions if you're not able to, and a property transfer. So the house will be protected if you need to go into long-term care. What kind of long-term care? Just a nice facility where trained professionals can keep an eye on you, Marcus said soothingly. Somewhere you won't have to worry about cooking or cleaning or managing bills. You'll have activities and social interaction with other people your age. But I don't want to leave my house. I want to stay here. I know you do, sweetie, Brielle said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. But this house is becoming dangerous for someone with your condition. What if you forgot to turn off the stove and started a fire? What if you fell down the basement stairs because you got disoriented? What if you had a heart episode and nobody was here to help you? The way she described these scenarios sent chills down my spine. These weren't random examples. They were specific plans for how they intended to kill me. Have I been having heart episodes? I asked, playing dumb. Marcus nodded gravely. Several. You probably don't remember because they can cause temporary memory loss. That's why Dr. Harrison recommended the life insurance policy, to make sure your final expenses were covered and that there would be money to take care of any property damage if something happened at the house. Property damage? If there was an accident, a fire or a gas leak or structural damage from a fall, the insurance money would help cover repairs and cleanup costs, Brielle explained. It's really just a practical precaution. They were describing my murder so casually, as if planning to kill me was just sensible estate planning. The recording device against my chest felt warm, capturing every word of their confession. I'm still confused about some things, I said hesitantly. The police said you changed my locks and hired moving men to take my furniture. They said you stole money from my bank account. How is that protecting me? Marcus and Brielle exchanged a quick glance, and I saw them silently agree on their story. Mom, you asked us to change the locks after you got confused about whether you'd locked the doors, Marcus said. You were worried about break-ins, remember? And you authorized us to move your valuables to a secure storage unit while the house was empty during your cruise. What about the bank withdrawals? You gave us access to your debit card for emergencies, Brielle said smoothly. Sometimes you needed help with bills or groceries, and you couldn't always get to the bank yourself because of your memory problems. Every lie was another piece of evidence. They weren't just admitting to the crimes they'd committed. They were creating a detailed record of their defense strategy based on claiming I was mentally incompetent. The police also mentioned something about forged medical records. I continued watching their faces carefully. Not forged, Marcus said quickly. Dr. Harrison's evaluation is completely legitimate. You were examined thoroughly and he documented your condition according to medical standards. The police are just suspicious because they don't understand the complexity of elder care issues. Can I see the medical records? Brielle reached into the briefcase and handed me a folder. Here's everything Dr. Harrison has documented about your condition. As you can see, it's very thorough. I opened the folder and pretended to read the fabricated medical records that claimed I had moderate dementia, significant memory loss, and a dangerous heart condition requiring immediate medical intervention. According to these false documents, I was a woman who could barely function independently and posed a danger to myself if left unsupervised. This says I have severe memory problems and heart disease. I said, my voice small and frightened. Is it really that bad? I'm afraid so. Marcus set his arm around my shoulders in a mockery of filial comfort. But that's why we're here. We're going to take care of everything so you don't have to worry. What exactly does take care of everything mean? Well, first we'll get these legal charges dropped by explaining to the prosecutor that it was all a misunderstanding caused by your condition, Brielle said. Then we'll get you settled in a nice care facility where you'll be safe and comfortable. And we'll manage the sale of this house and your assets so you have money for your medical expenses. You're going to sell my house. Only because we love you and want what's best for you, Marcus said. This place is too big and too dangerous for someone in your condition. The money from the sale will ensure you get the best possible care for the rest of your life. The rest of my life. From their tone and the insurance documents I'd found, they weren't expecting that to be very long. I need to think about all this, I said, carefully closing the medical folder. It's a lot to process. Of course it is, Brielle said, reaching across to pat my knee. But Mom, we really need to move quickly on the legal paperwork. The longer these charges stay active, the more complicated everything becomes. Can you at least sign the power of attorney today so we can start fixing things with the police? This was the moment Agent Chen had prepared me for. They wanted me to voluntarily sign away my rights so they could claim I'd been competent enough to make that decision, validating all their other forgeries and thefts. If I sign that, what happens to me? Nothing bad, Marcus promised. We just become legally authorized to help you with things you can't manage anymore. Banking, medical decisions, property management, all the complicated adult stuff that's becoming too much for you. And if something happens to me, if I die, then everything will be handled properly according to your wishes, Brielle said. The life insurance will cover your final expenses, and any remaining assets will go to your family as intended. As intended by whom? By you, of course. You set all this up when you were still thinking clearly. They were asking me to sign my own death warrant while claiming I'd already agreed to my murder when I was supposedly competent. The audacity was breathtaking. I think I'm ready to sign, I said finally, but I have one more question first. Of course, Mom. What is it? I looked directly into Marcus's eyes, searching for any trace of the son I'd raised. Did you ever love me, or was I always just a paycheck to you? For just a moment his mask slipped and I saw something that might have been genuine emotion. But it was gone so quickly I couldn't be sure. Mom, of course I love you. Everything we're doing is because we love you. It was the last lie he would tell me as a free man. Through the living room window, I could see Agent Chen's signal. A woman walking a dog past my house, the prearranged sign that the recording equipment had captured enough evidence for their arrest. In that case, I said, standing up slowly, I have something to tell you both. I walked to my front window and turned to face Marcus and Brielle, who were still sitting comfortably on my furniture, surrounded by their forged documents and elaborate lies. Marcus shot to his feet, his face draining of color. Mom, what are you talking about? You're confused again. We never said anything about... Sit down and shut up, I said with a voice I'd never used with my son before. For the first time in 35 years, you're going to listen to me instead of lying to me. Brielle started gathering the papers from the coffee table. Ashlyn, you're having an episode. Let us call Dr. Harrison and... Dr. Harrison is in federal custody, I said calmly. He was arrested this morning for medical fraud, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. So is your friend Douglas Whitman. And in about 30 seconds, so are you." The color drained from Brielle's face as she realized the scope of what was happening. Marcus looked confused and frightened like a child who'd been caught in a lie, but couldn't understand how his parents knew the truth. "You see, Marcus, I'm not suffering from dementia. I'm not confused or frightened or helpless. I'm a 68-year-old woman with a sharp mind, a clear memory, and access to federal law enforcement agents who've been investigating your criminal network for 18 months. I walked to my bookshelf and removed a picture frame revealing the small camera that had been recording everything. Every conversation we've had, every phone call, every document you've shown me, all of it has been recorded as evidence, including your detailed confessions to conspiracy, fraud, theft, and premeditated murder." Marcus sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. Oh God, what have we done?" "You planned to murder your mother for money," I said flatly. "You forged medical records, stole thousands of dollars from my bank account, tried to steal my house, and took out life insurance policies based on fictional medical conditions so you could kill me and collect the payouts." "We never actually hurt you," Brielle said desperately. "We never actually went through with anything. Planning isn't the same as doing. Planning to commit murder is conspiracy to commit murder. That's a federal crime punishable by life in prison. And you did go through with fraud, theft, forgery, and elder abuse. Those are also federal crimes." The sound of car doors slamming echoed from my driveway. Through the window, I could see Agent Chen approaching my front door with 4 other federal agents. "The FBI has been listening to everything you've said for the past hour," I continued. "They heard you confess to forging my medical records. They heard you admit to stealing my money and planning to sell my house. They heard you describe specific scenarios for killing me in staged accidents. And they heard you try to manipulate me into signing documents that would have validated all your previous crimes." Marcus looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted it to go this far. Brielle said we just needed to borrow some money, and then it kept getting more complicated, and then—" "Don't you dare blame this on Brielle," I snapped. "You're a 35-year-old man who made a conscious decision to steal from the woman who sacrificed everything for you. You chose to forge my signature. You chose to drain my bank account. You chose to plan my murder. Own your choices." Agent Chen knocked on my front door, 3 sharp raps that sounded like the hammer of justice. "That's the FBI," I announced. "They're here to arrest you for conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, insurance fraud, bank fraud, forgery, and about a dozen other federal crimes. Your friend Whitman has already started cooperating with authorities to reduce his sentence. Dr. Harrison is telling them everything about the medical fraud network, and you're both going to prison for a very long time." "Please," Brielle begged, falling to her knees beside my couch. "Please don't do this to us. We can pay back the money. We can make this right. I have a daughter. She needs her mother. Please." "You should have thought about your daughter before you decided to murder someone else's mother," I replied. "You should have thought about the consequences before you committed the crimes." I opened my front door to let Agent Chen and her team into my living room. Marcus and Brielle were read their rights as federal agents secured the scene and collected the forged documents they'd brought as evidence of their intentions. Marcus David Garrett and Brielle Ann Garrett. Agent Chen announced, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder in the first-degree elder abuse mail, fraud wire, fraud bank, fraud insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud against a financial institution." As the agents led them toward the door in handcuffs, Marcus turned back to me one last time. "Mom, I know I don't deserve it, but can you ever forgive me?" I looked at my son, really looked at him, and tried to find some trace of the little boy I'd raised. But all I saw was a man who'd been willing to kill me for money, who'd spent months planning my death, while I worried about his financial problems and offered to help him however I could. Marcus, forgiveness is something you earn through accepting responsibility and making amends. You've done neither. You've spent the last hour lying to me, manipulating me, and asking me to sign documents that would have facilitated my own murder. So no, I don't forgive you, and I never will. His face crumpled, but he didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. As the FBI cars pulled out of my driveway, I stood in my living room surrounded by the evidence of my son's betrayal. The forged medical records lay scattered on my coffee table beside the fabricated power of attorney documents and the life insurance policies that were supposed to pay for my murder. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe in my own home, but I also felt profoundly alone in a way I'd never experienced before. Marcus hadn't just betrayed my trust, he'd stolen my identity as a mother. The child I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for had never really existed. In his place was a stranger who'd seen me as nothing more than an obstacle to his financial security. Agent Chen returned an hour later to debrief me on what would happen next. "The case against them is ironclad," she assured me. "With the recorded confessions, the forged documents, the evidence of bank fraud, and the testimony from Dr. Harrison about the medical fraud network, they're looking at decades in federal prison." "What about the other victims?" "Your case has given us everything we need to prosecute the entire network. 12 other families will get justice because you were brave enough to help us gather this evidence." As Agent Chen left, I realized something important had changed inside me. For the first time in my life, I'd fought back against people who were trying to hurt me. I'd been strategic, patient, and ultimately victorious against enemies who'd assumed I was too old, too trusting, and too weak to defend myself. They'd been very, very wrong. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom watching my son receive his sentence. Marcus had pled guilty to all charges in exchange for a slightly reduced sentence, but the judge showed no mercy for a man who'd planned to murder his own mother. "Mr. Garrett," Judge Patricia Williams said from the bench, her voice carrying the weight of absolute moral authority. "In my 23 years on the federal bench, I have rarely encountered a case that demonstrates such complete moral bankruptcy. You conspired to murder the woman who raised you, sacrificed for you, and loved you unconditionally. Your actions represent a betrayal of the most fundamental bonds of human decency." Marcus stood in his orange jumpsuit flanked by federal marshals, looking smaller and older than his 35 years. He'd lost weight during his months in jail, and his sandy hair had begun to show premature gray at the temples. When the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, he turned to look directly at me. "Your Honor, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want my mother to know that I'm sorry. I was desperate and stupid, and I let other people convince me to do things that I know were wrong. I destroyed the most important relationship in my life for money that wouldn't have solved my problems anyway. I'll spend the rest of my life regretting what I did to the woman who loved me most." His voice cracked on the last words, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. But that child was gone, replaced by a man who'd proven capable of unthinkable cruelty. "Mr. Garrett, your expressions of remorse ring hollow when considered alongside the premeditated nature of your crimes," Judge Williams continued. "You didn't make a single mistake in a moment of desperation. You engaged in months of calculated planning to defraud, abuse, and ultimately murder your elderly mother. The court sentences you to 20 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." Marcus's knees buckled and the marshals caught him before he could fall. 20 years meant he'd be 55 when he got out, if he survived federal prison at all. Brielle's sentencing had been the week before. She'd received 18 years after refusing to cooperate with authorities and maintaining her innocence throughout the trial. her daughter now being raised by Brielle's sister, would be an adult before her mother was eligible for release. Douglas Whitman had received 25 years as the ringleader of the elder fraud network. Dr. Harrison got 15 years for medical fraud and conspiracy. The entire network was destroyed, and law enforcement agencies across 3 states were using our case as a model for investigating similar crimes. But the most satisfying moment had come during the asset forfeiture hearings. Every penny Marcus and Brielle had stolen from me was returned with interest. The fraudulent life insurance policies resulted in substantial settlements from the insurance companies for their failure to detect obvious fraud. The bank paid damages for allowing unauthorized access to my accounts. In total, the financial settlements exceeded $400,000. I donated half of that money to establish the Elder Justice Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating families about elder abuse and supporting victims of financial exploitation. The other half, I used to renovate my house and install the security systems I actually needed. The house itself had become a sanctuary. Mrs. Patterson and I had become closer friends through the ordeal, and she introduced me to a support group for seniors who'd experienced family betrayal. Every Tuesday evening, my living room hosted meetings for elderly fraud survivors, and twice a month we held educational workshops for family members who wanted to learn how to protect their aging relatives. The work gave my life a purpose I hadn't expected to find in my late 60s. The Elder Justice Foundation had helped recover over $2 million in stolen assets for other victims and had successfully lobbied for stronger federal protections for elderly Americans. 3 months earlier, Congress had passed the Elder Protection Act, legislation specifically designed to prevent the kind of fraud Marcus and Brielle had attempted. But perhaps the most meaningful change was personal. I discovered strength I didn't know I possessed and learned that being victimized didn't make me a victim. I'd fought back against people who tried to destroy me, and I'd won completely and permanently. My relationships with other family members had also been transformed. My nephew David visited regularly, helping with yard work and home maintenance, while ensuring I had family support from people who actually cared about my well-being. My brother's children who lived in other states now called frequently and visited during holidays. They'd been horrified to learn about Marcus's crimes and had rallied around me with the kind of family love I'd thought was lost forever. The hardest part was accepting that I'd never have grandchildren, never experience the joy of watching Marcus become a father, never share family holidays with the child I'd raised. That grief came in waves, usually late at night when the house was quiet, and I remembered all the dreams I'd had for his future. But I'd learned to separate grieving for the son I'd lost from anger about the crimes he'd committed. Marcus, the 7-year-old who'd needed comfort during thunderstorms, was a different person from Marcus, the 35-year-old who'd planned my murder. I could mourn the first while condemning the second. The doorbell interrupted my reflection, and I opened it to find Janet Morrison, my retired police detective neighbor, holding a bottle of wine and a folder of papers. "Ashlyn, I have some news I thought you'd want to hear immediately," she said, settling into my kitchen with familiar ease. "The FBI just arrested 3 more people in connection with your case." "More people." Turns out, the Elder Fraud Network was even bigger than anyone realized. They found connections to similar schemes in 7 states, all using the same pattern of forged medical records and fraudulent insurance policies. Your case broke it wide open. Janet opened her folder and showed me newspaper clippings from around the country. In Florida, 2 adult children had been arrested for murdering their father in a staged home accident after taking out life insurance policies worth $600,000. In Arizona, a daughter-in-law was facing charges for slowly poisoning her elderly mother-in-law while draining her retirement accounts. In Texas, an entire assisted living facility had been shut down for systematically defrauding and abusing elderly residents. How many people total? I asked. So far, 47 arrests across 7 states, financial recoveries totaling over $8 million. And they're estimating that your willingness to cooperate prevented at least 20 additional murders. 20 people were alive because I'd been brave enough to help the FBI gather evidence against my own son. The number was staggering, but it also brought a sense of completion I hadn't expected. There's something else, Janet continued. The Attorney General wants to present you with a civilian award for courage in assisting federal law enforcement. It's a pretty big deal. I laughed, thinking about how unlikely it was that a 68-year-old retired woman from suburban Ohio would become a federal crime fighter. I didn't do anything special. I just refused to let them get away with trying to kill me. That's exactly what made it special. Most people in your situation would have been too scared or too heartbroken to fight back. You turned the worst betrayal imaginable into a tool for justice. After Janet left, I sat in my garden watching the sunset and thinking about the strange turns life can take. A year ago, I'd been a lonely widow worried about my son's financial problems and grateful for any attention from my daughter-in-law. Today, I was a federal crime-fighting advocate surrounded by chosen family who valued me for who I was rather than what I owned. Marcus had tried to steal my life, but instead he'd given me a purpose I'd never imagined. His betrayal had revealed strength I didn't know I possessed and connected me with a community of survivors who understood the unique pain of family betrayal. The phone rang and I answered to hear a familiar voice. Mrs. Garrett. This is Agent Chen. I'm calling with the final update on your case. The last of the network associates were sentenced today, and the Elder Justice Foundation has been officially recognized as a model program for victim services. I wanted you to know that your courage has literally changed how we investigate these crimes nationwide. Thank you, Agent Chen, for everything. Thank you, Mrs. Garrett. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and used it to protect other people. That's the definition of heroism. As I hung up the phone, I realized that Marcus had been wrong about almost everything. He'd assumed I was weak, naive, and helpless. He'd believed that age made me vulnerable and that maternal love made me blind. He'd counted on my trust to make his betrayal possible and my isolation to make his crimes invisible. But he'd forgotten the most important truth about the woman who'd raised him. I'd survived widowhood at 37 single parenthood for 28 years and decades of financial struggle through sheer determination and strategic thinking. The strength that had gotten me through those challenges was the same strength that had brought him to justice. The lesson I'd learned wasn't about forgiveness or family loyalty or the healing power of time. It was about the importance of recognizing your own worth and refusing to accept abuse from anyone, even people you love. Especially people you love. True love doesn't steal from you, lie to you, or plan to murder you for insurance money. True love doesn't gaslight you into believing you're losing your mind or manipulate you into signing away your rights. True love respects your autonomy, celebrates your strength, and protects your well-being. I'd spent 35 years confusing manipulation with affection and enabling with motherly love. Marcus's betrayal had taught me the difference between caring for someone and allowing them to destroy you in the name of family obligation. Now at 68, I was finally free to be the person I'd always been underneath the roles of wife and mother. A strong, intelligent, capable woman who deserved respect and protection rather than exploitation and betrayal. The sunset painted my garden in shades of gold and purple, and I felt genuinely peaceful for the first time in months. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the Elder Justice Foundation expanded its services to help more victims. There would be legislative hearings about strengthening elder protection laws and media interviews about my experience. There would be the ongoing work of building a life defined by purpose rather than victimhood. But tonight, I was simply a woman who'd fought for her life and won. I was a survivor who'd turned her trauma into a tool for helping others. I was a mother who'd loved completely and learned to set boundaries when that love was weaponized against me. Marcus had tried to steal my future, but instead, he'd freed me to create a better one. His betrayal had been meant to destroy me, but it had actually shown me who I really was underneath decades of self-sacrifice and people-pleasing. I was Ashlyn Garrett, federal crime victim, turned crime fighter survivor, turned advocate mother, turned protector of other people's mothers. And for the first time in my life, I was proud of who I'd become. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, I want to ask you something important. Have you ever experienced betrayal by someone you trusted completely? How did you find the strength to rebuild your life after discovering that the people you loved were willing to harm you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with anyone who might need to hear about the importance of protecting themselves from financial exploitation. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about ordinary people who found extraordinary strength in impossible circumstances. Thank you for listening to my story and for supporting the ongoing fight against elder abuse. Remember that age is not weakness, trust is not naivety, and survival is always possible when you refuse to give up on yourself. May you always have the courage to protect what matters most and the wisdom to recognize when love has turned into something else entirely.